The plasma bolt passed so close to Queen Seravyne's head that it singed her ceremonial crown. Tobias Kern moved without thinking, his body reacting with the combat instincts earned through 10 years of military service in humanity's roughest conflicts. He threw himself between the queen and the assassin, his arm coming up with the stolen guard rifle he had picked up 30 seconds earlier when the coup began. He fired 3 times. The assassin fell. "There are more coming," Tobias said, grabbing the queen's arm with perhaps more force than protocol allowed. "We need to move now." Seravyne stared at him with eyes like liquid silver, her expression unreadable behind the natural iridescence of her skin. She was tall, easily 7 feet, with features that combined regal beauty with an otherness that marked her as Seravyne, one of the oldest and most powerful species in the known galaxy. "You dare touch royalty?" she asked, her voice carrying harmonics that made the question sound like music. "I dare keep you alive," Tobias shot back. "Which is more than your guards managed. Now move, or we both die here." Another explosion rocked the palace. Seravyne made a decision and ran with him, her ceremonial robes flowing behind her as they sprinted through corridors Tobias barely knew. He had been on her world for less than a week, a junior diplomat from Earth attending trade negotiations, and now he was somehow responsible for the survival of the Seravyne Empire's absolute monarch. They burst into a service corridor. Tobias sealed the door behind them and started looking for alternate routes. His knowledge of the palace layout was minimal, but his knowledge of building design was excellent. Every structure had patterns, weaknesses, escape routes. "The rebellion is led by Duke Morthen," Seravyne said, her breathing controlled despite the running. "He seeks to end the monarchy and establish a military council. He will kill me to achieve this. How many are loyal to you?" "Unknown." The attack was coordinated perfectly. "My personal guard was compromised. I do not know who to trust." "Then we trust no one except ourselves." Tobias found a maintenance shaft that led down. "Can you climb?" "I am Seravyne royalty, not helpless." There was steel in her musical voice. "I can do whatever survival demands." They descended 3 levels, moving through parts of the palace where servants worked and machinery hummed. Tobias kept them moving, kept them ahead of the search parties he could hear echoing through the corridors above. "Why did you help me?" Seravyne asked as they paused in a storage room to catch their breath. "You are human. This conflict does not concern your people. You were about to die. That was the only thing that concerned me in that moment." Tobias checked the rifle's charge. "Half depleted. Not great. I am not good at watching people get murdered when I can do something about it. Most beings would have fled, saved themselves. The alliance between our peoples is new and fragile. You risked a great deal." "Yeah, well, I have never been great at doing the smart thing." Tobias peered through the doorway. "We need to reach your loyalist forces." "Where would they regroup if the palace fell?" "The Crystal Fortress, 20 kilometers north. But we would need transportation and the city is in chaos." "Then we get creative." Tobias started moving again. "I am human. Creative problem solving under pressure is what we do best." They made it to the palace garage where diplomatic vehicles were stored. Tobias hot-wired a transport that looked fast and sturdy while Seravyne kept watch. Her regal bearing had not diminished despite the circumstances. Even covered in dust and running for her life, she carried herself like someone born to rule. "You are skilled at theft," she observed. "I am skilled at survival. Sometimes they overlap." Tobias got the vehicle running. "Get in. This is going to be a rough ride." The city outside was burning. Morthen's forces had moved quickly, seizing key infrastructure and broadcasting messages about liberation from tyranny. Tobias drove through streets where Seravyne fought each other, where ancient alliances shattered in the heat of revolution. "My people are killing each other over political philosophy," Seravyne said quietly, watching the chaos. "How did I fail them so completely?" "You did not fail them. Someone sold them a lie wrapped in pretty words." Tobias dodged a burning barricade. "Revolution always sounds noble until you see the bodies it creates." They were 3 blocks from the city limits when the pursuit craft appeared. Military grade, armed, and absolutely focused on killing them. "Hold on," Tobias shouted, throwing the transport into maneuvers it was not designed for. Plasma fire scorched the road behind them. He drove like a madman, using every trick he had learned in combat zones across human space. "You are insane," Seravyne said, gripping her seat as he drove through a market that scattered Karithi civilians in all directions. I am committed, Tobias corrected. There is a difference. He led the pursuit craft into narrow streets where its size became a disadvantage. Then, in a move that made Seravyne make a sound no queen should make, he drove their transport straight through a shop, out the back, and into a different district entirely. The pursuit craft tried to follow. It did not fit. The crash was spectacular. Your driving is a violation of every traffic law my people have established, Seravyne said as they reached open road. Good thing I am not Karithi. Tobias grinned despite the danger. Just a human doing his best not to let a queen die on his watch. They reached the Crystal Fortress just ahead of Morthen's forces. The Loyalist general, Commander Thyrek, nearly shot them both before recognizing his queen. Then there were soldiers everywhere, securing Seravyne, establishing perimeters, preparing for siege. You saved my life, Seravyne said to Tobias as medics checked her for injuries. By Karithi law and custom, I am bound to offer you reward. Name anything within my power to grant, and it is yours. Tobias looked at her. This alien queen who had run through fire with him, who had climbed maintenance shafts in ceremonial robes, who had watched her world tear itself apart, and still maintained her dignity. I choose you, he said. The room went silent. Every Karithi present froze. Seravyne's silver eyes went wide with something that might have been shock or might have been fear. Explain yourself, she said carefully. You offered me anything in your power. I choose you. Your partnership. Your companionship. Not as property or trophy, but as equals working together. Tobias met her gaze steadily. You are facing a civil war. You need someone you can trust absolutely. Someone with no ties to Karithi politics. Someone who proved they will put your life above their own. I am that person. So I choose you. Your trust. Your alliance. Your friendship. You do not want wealth? Territory? Political power. I want to help you win this war and rebuild your empire into something worth ruling. I want to be the person standing beside you when it gets hard. I want partnership with someone I respect. Tobias smiled. Everything else is just stuff. You are what matters. Seravyne stared at him for a long moment. Around them, Karithi whispered in their musical language. Finally, she spoke. No one has ever chosen me. They choose my crown, my power, my resources. But never me. Her voice carried an emotion Tobias could not quite identify. You are either the wisest being I have ever met or the most foolish. I have been told both with equal frequency, Tobias admitted. Usually, I am both simultaneously. Something shifted in Seravyne's expression. A decision made. Very well, Tobias Kern of Earth. I accept your choice. You will stand as my personal advisor and companion. You will have my trust, and in return I will have yours. We will face this war together as partners. That is all I ask. That is everything, she corrected. And far more responsibility than you likely understand. The war that followed was brutal. Morthen had prepared well, securing support from 3 neighboring systems and mercenary fleets. The Karithi Empire tore itself apart as factions chose sides based on ideology, opportunism, or ancient grudges. Tobias stood beside Seravyne through every battle, every negotiation, every impossible choice. He brought human perspective to Karithi problems, offering solutions that her people would never consider because they were too bound by tradition. You cannot negotiate with the border lords, Commander Thyrek insisted during a strategy meeting. They are pirates and scavengers, beneath royal attention. They are pirates with ships and knowledge of the contested territories, Tobias countered. We need both. So we negotiate. It is beneath Her Majesty's dignity. Her Majesty's dignity will not win this war. Tobias looked at Seravyne. You need allies. The border lords hate Morthen because he killed their previous leader in a raid. The enemy of your enemy is your friend, or at least a useful temporary ally. Seravyne considered. Tobias is correct. Arrange the meeting. We negotiate. The Border Lord Alliance gave them control of key supply routes. It also gave Tobias a reputation among the Karithi as someone who thought differently, who saw opportunities where they saw only obstacles. Your people think I am corrupting you, Tobias said one night as they reviewed battle reports in her command chamber. My people think many things. Most of them are wrong. Seravyne studied a tactical display showing Morthen's latest positions. You have won us 3 engagements that should have been defeats. You have secured alliances I would never have considered. You are proving my choice to accept your offer was wise. You are proving my choice to make it was wise, Tobias replied. I have served under a dozen commanders. None of them had your combination of strength and adaptability. You listen to advice even when it contradicts tradition. That is rare. Tradition nearly got me killed. Tradition said my guards were unquestionably loyal. Tradition said Morthen would never move against the throne. Seravyne's colors shifted, a Karithi expression of frustration. Tradition is useful until it becomes a chain. You helped me see that. They worked late into the night, two beings from different species finding common ground and shared purpose. Somewhere in those long hours of strategy and conversation, Tobias realized he was no longer just protecting a queen. He was partnering with someone extraordinary. The turning point came 4 months into the war. Morthen had cornered them in the Shattered Peaks, a mountain range where terrain negated most technological advantages. It was going to be brutal close combat, and the rebels outnumbered loyalist forces 2-1. We cannot win this, Thyrek said flatly. We should retreat while evacuation is still possible. Retreat to where? Seravyne asked. Morthen controls everything beyond these mountains. If we run, we have nowhere left to go. Then we die gloriously rather than survive in shame. Or, Tobias interjected, we do not die at all. We win. How? Thyrek demanded. You are not military. You do not understand what we face. I am human. I understand that terrain works both ways. Tobias pulled up geological surveys. These mountains are unstable. Volcanic activity dormant for centuries. But not dead, just sleeping. Seravyne leaned forward, understanding dawning in her silver eyes. You want to wake them? I want to make Morthen's numerical advantage meaningless by changing the battlefield itself. Tobias showed them the plan. Precision strikes on specific geological weak points. Controlled eruptions that would fragment the rebel forces and make their superior numbers a liability in the chaos. This is insane, Thyrek breathed. This is human, Seravyne corrected. We execute his plan. The battle was everything Tobias had promised and more terrifying. The mountains screamed as geological forces humans had calculated and Karithi engineers had triggered tore through rebel formations. Lava and ash created barriers that split Morthen's army into isolated segments. The Loyalists, positioned according to Tobias's plan, struck with surgical precision. It was not a fair fight. It was an ambush executed on a geological scale. Morthen died in the chaos, crushed under a rockfall he never saw coming. His remaining forces surrendered within the week. The war was over. The Karithi Empire had survived. The victory celebration was subdued. Too many had died. Too much had been destroyed. Seravyne stood before her people, crowned again in the palace that had been reclaimed from the rebels, and spoke of rebuilding and reconciliation. Tobias watched from the side, uncomfortable with the ceremony but present because Seravyne had asked him to be. After the formalities, she found him in the palace gardens where earth plants had been imported as part of the original diplomatic exchange. You are avoiding the celebration, she observed. I am human. We get awkward at formal events where people want to thank us for things. Tobias looked up at Karithi stars that were not his own. I did what needed doing. That is all. You did far more. Seravyne sat beside him, her height making the gesture graceful. You saved my life. You saved my empire. You fundamentally changed how my people think about problems and solutions. I just offered a different perspective. You offered everything. Your time, your expertise, your loyalty when you had every reason to flee to safety. Her colors shifted to something warm. You chose me when I offered you reward. I did not understand what that meant then. I understand now. What does it mean? It means you saw value in partnership over possessions, in person over power. It means you understood something my own people had forgotten, that the most valuable thing a being can offer is themselves. Seravyne turned to face him fully. You gave me your trust, your friendship, your partnership. You asked nothing except that I give the same in return. And did you? Tobias asked quietly. Yes. Somewhere between the running and fighting and planning, I stopped seeing you as the human who saved me. I started seeing you as Tobias, my advisor, my friend, my partner in every meaningful sense. Your people will talk. A human standing as equal to the Karithi queen. Let them talk. I rule an empire that nearly collapsed because we were too rigid to adapt. You showed us that different perspectives make us stronger, not weaker. That tradition should serve us, not bind us. Seravyne's expression softened. And if they object to a human standing beside me, they can explain why the being who saved their queen and empire is unworthy. I suspect they will find the argument difficult. Tobias laughed. You have gotten scary good at politics. I learned from watching you negotiate with border lords and plan geological ambushes. You taught me that rules are guides, not chains. That sometimes the best solution is the one no one has considered because it seems impossible. She extended her hand, a gesture she had learned from him. Thank you, Tobias Kern, for choosing me, for seeing value in partnership when you could have asked for anything else. He took her hand, human and Seravyne, different but compatible. Thank you for accepting, for trusting a junior diplomat who had no business getting involved in a coup. You had every business. You saw someone in danger and refused to walk away. That is who you are. Seravyne smiled, an expression that took Tobias months to recognize across species lines. The galaxy is better for having beings like you in it. They sat in the garden as night deepened, talking about rebuilding, about the future, about the unlikely friendship that had formed in fire and chaos. Around them, the Seravyne Empire began the slow work of healing its wounds. Word of the human who stood beside the queen spread across the galaxy. Diplomats asked questions. Scholars studied the partnership. Other species watched with interest as Seravyne and human worked together to reshape an ancient empire. They are calling us the dual throne, Seravyne mentioned one day as they reviewed reconstruction plans. You and I, the queen and her champion, the Seravyne and the human. I am not royalty. I am just your advisor. You are my partner. That makes you more important than any title. Seravyne pulled up a proposal. The council wants to formalize your position, create an official role of queen's companion, equal standing in all matters except succession. They argue that your contributions to the empire merit recognition. And what do you want? I want what I accepted when you made your choice. Partnership, friendship, someone I trust standing beside me. She met his eyes. The title simply makes official what already exists. Tobias considered. Will this cause problems? Political complications. Everything causes political complications. The question is whether the value outweighs the complexity. Seravyne's colors shifted to determination. You are valuable. The complexity is irrelevant. Then I accept, if only to avoid arguing with a queen who has already decided. Wise decision. The formalization ceremony was simpler than the coronation, but no less significant. Tobias knelt before Seravyne in the throne room where months ago they had fled assassins together. Now that same room witnessed him being named Queen's companion, the first non-Seravyne to hold formal position in the Empire's government. You chose me when you could have chosen wealth or power, Seravyne said, following the ceremonial script but adding her own words. In doing so, you showed my people what true value means. Not what we possess, but who we become when we stand together. Rise, Tobias Kern, companion to the Queen, partner in service to the Seravyne Empire. He rose to find her extending both hands, a Seravyne gesture of equal regard. He took them, and the throne room erupted in the musical applause of her people. Later, in private, Seravyne asked the question that had been hovering between them. Do you regret your choice? You could have asked for a fortune, for a planet, for anything material. Tobias thought about the long nights of strategic planning, the battles fought side by side, the conversations that ranged from military tactics to philosophy to jokes that crossed species boundaries. He thought about the friendship that had grown from crisis into something profound. Not for a second, he said. Everything else you could have given me would have been things I owned. This is something I became. Partner to a queen who changed her entire empire rather than cling to failing traditions. Friend to someone who trusted a human stranger because he proved himself trustworthy. That is worth more than any material reward. You are either incredibly wise or incredibly foolish. Still both, Tobias confirmed. Probably always will be. Seravyne laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. Then we are well matched. Because I was either incredibly wise or incredibly foolish to accept a partnership offered by a junior diplomat who stole a transport and drove through a shop. That was a tactical necessity. That was insane and brilliant and exactly what I needed. She became serious. You gave me something no one else could. Not loyalty bought with position, but friendship earned through action. That is why your choice shocked me. Because you saw me, not my crown. The crown is impressive, Tobias admitted. But you are the one who wore it while climbing through maintenance shafts. That is the person I chose to stand beside. They stood together on the palace balcony overlooking a city that was rebuilding. Scars remained, but so did hope. The empire had survived because it learned to adapt, to accept new ideas, to value partnership over rigid tradition. The galaxy is watching us, Seravyne said. Seravyne and human working as equals. It challenges their assumptions about how species interact. Good. Assumptions need challenging. Tobias smiled. Besides, we already proved the impossible happens when someone is crazy enough to try. Crazy enough to throw himself between a queen and an assassin. Crazy enough to run through a burning city. Crazy enough to trigger volcanic eruptions as military strategy. Crazy enough to choose partnership over power when offered reward. Seravyne's colors shifted through patterns that Tobias had learned meant deep emotion. That was not crazy. That was the sanest choice anyone has made in my entire reign. Because it worked out? Because it was real. Everything else people ask for is transactional. Take and leave. But you asked for something mutual. Something that required both of us to give and both of us to receive. She looked at him with those silver eyes. That is not crazy. That is what partnership means. They watched the city lights come on as evening fell. Somewhere out there, Seravyne citizens were learning to trust again, to build again, to believe their empire could survive by embracing change instead of fearing it. And at the center of it all stood a queen and her companion. Seravyne and human. Different species, different backgrounds, different ways of thinking. But united in purpose and bound by friendship that had been tested in fire and found unbreakable. I am glad you chose me, Seravyne said quietly. So am I, Tobias replied. Best decision I ever made. Even knowing the work ahead, the challenges we still face. Especially knowing that. Because we face them together. That is the whole point. Seravyne extended her hand again. Tobias took it. Two beings from different worlds, standing together against whatever the galaxy would throw at them next. The alien queen had offered him any reward in her power. He had chosen her. She had been shocked because no one had ever seen her as more valuable than what she could give them. But Tobias understood something her own people had forgotten. The greatest treasures were not things you owned, but relationships you built. Not what you took, but what you gave. Not power over others, but partnership with them. He had chosen her because she was worth choosing. Because the person who ran through fire and climbed through shafts and trusted a stranger in her darkest hour was someone extraordinary. And every day since, they had proven that choice was the wisest thing either of them had ever done. The galaxy watched in fascination as human and Seravyne rewrote the rules of how species could interact. But Tobias and Seravyne were not performing for an audience. They were simply two beings who had found something rare and valuable in each other and chosen to honor that with partnership. She had offered him anything. He had asked for everything that mattered. And together they proved that sometimes the most powerful reward is not what you receive, but who you become when you choose wisely. If you enjoyed the story, like the video and subscribe for more. Thank you.